Hey there, this is Natalie, and this is going to be a video full of speculation and the odd crack theory about what might happen later in ReZero regarding Subaru and the authority of gluttony. There will be spoilers in this video from beyond the anime, including mentions of the ending of Arc 6, so if you're not caught up and are avoiding spoilers, then it's best to turn back now. However, if you don't mind knowing some details from later in the story, I will be explaining the concepts I'm going to be talking about enough that you should be able to follow the video without being up to date on the web novel or light novels. So, let's get straight into Subaru's authority of gluttony. Will he get one? And what might it do if he does? To start with, it's necessary to think about why Subaru might get an authority of gluttony in the first place. Most people assume that with the talk of Subaru being a sage candidate, something that has been said by the witches means he's going to become a sage. We don't actually know exactly what makes someone a sage, but the theory that it's holding all of the sin witch factors is so widely accepted that a lot of people just treat it as fact. There's a door, or a set of doors, depending whether you're reading the web novel or light novels, in the Pleiades watchtower, that seems like it will only open when all of the witch factors are present. And again, while we don't know yet what the door's for, it seems important and connected to Subaru. The Pleiades watchtower, and so presumably the doors too, was created by Flugel, a past sage, who also seems to be very similar to Subaru, and a lot of people theorise that they're the same person in some way, either by time travel or reincarnation, or various other things. I have a video all about that if you're interested in it, and there are also two good videos about the Subaru-Flugel connection by JakeZeb123, so I won't go into all of that in this one. But if we take it that Subaru is going to need to open the doors at some point in the story, he's going to need to have all of the witch factors. So far he's obtained greed and sloth, in both cases by killing the Sin Archbishops that held them previously, and in both cases he got an authority, a new special ability that comes with the witch factor. It also seems likely that he already has an authority of envy in the form of Return by Death itself. This is interesting because the Witch of Envy is still alive, so it seems like killing someone who has currently got a witch factor isn't the only way to obtain one. It also seems possible from this and from various other things, though I'm trying to keep it simple for this video, that someone with a witch factor can give part of it to someone else. Now this all means that Subaru would need to kill or otherwise obtain the witch factors of lust, wrath, pride and gluttony. There are two other sins, melancholy and vainglory, but we don't know much about how they fit into things, and given the seal in the Pleiades watchtower requires 7, I think it's safe to assume that these two are not required, though who knows if Subaru will end up getting those authorities too at some point. Lust and Wrath are characters we have seen, Capella and Sirius, but they look to be characters who will be dealt with later in the story. Wrath was captured by Priscilla in Arc 5, so isn't currently a threat, but equally there's no reason why Subaru would kill her and get the witch factor yet either, and so I think there will probably be something to bring her out of this neutral position and back into the plot later, probably concerning her original identity. Lust is still at large, and we know she is in charge of the assassin organisation that raised Elsa and Mei Li. With Mei Li joining the Emilia faction at the end of Arc 6, she's likely to be a serious threat. But the identity of Capella Emerada Lagunica seems to be that of a member of the Lagunican royal family, which is also the case for Felt. And so I think Capella will be properly explored in Arc 8, which Tappei has indicated will heavily involve the Felt faction. Pride is a seat that's currently vacant, as far as the witch cult seem to think, but there has been a Sin Archbishop of Pride before, and so either there is a Sin Archbishop of Pride who just isn't known about and who Subaru will encounter later in the story. My preferred theory is that it's Al, Priscilla's knight, and this will come up in Arc 7, Or there isn't a Sin Archbishop of Pride at the moment, and Subaru will need to find the witch factor the previous Sin Archbishop had. All of the Pride stuff seems to point towards Wallachia, which is a country that's going to feature prominently in Arc 7, and so I think more of this will become clear in the new arc once it starts coming out. But Gluttony, well, Gluttony became the most significant enemy for Subaru when Lebat and Kaitos ate Rem at the end of Arc 3, but Arc 6 was when they were properly dealt with as main antagonists. We discovered that there was a second Gluttony, Roy Alphard, in Arc 5, and then in Arc 6, the third Gluttony, Louis Arneb, was revealed to exist. Arc 6 wasn't just about defeating these three, but it was one of the main things, and at the end of Arc 6, Lebat and Kaitos has been killed, though by Ram, not Subaru. Roy Alphard was captured by Julius, and Louis, well, we don't really know her situation or what it means at the end of Arc 6, but she did seem to have been neutralised as a threat earlier in the arc. It would seem then that the next authority Subaru will get should be Gluttony. Now, I want to get into talking about what powers the authority of Gluttony might give him, and Subaru's connection to Gluttony in general, but first I think it's worth talking about the possibility that he won't ever actually get the authority of Gluttony. If he doesn't need the authority per se, but just the Gluttony witch factor to become the sage, well, he's already had a Gluttony witch factor inside him during the period in Arc 6 where he had amnesia. Louis Arneb put part of her own witch factor into Subaru so she could experience his life, and this did seem to register as a fourth witch factor when he saw the seal in the Pleiades watchtower. If Tappei decides to give Louis some kind of redemption, rather than having Subaru need to kill her, then it's possible that she could become an ally, who Subaru could just sort of bring along inside himself when the time comes that he needs all of the witch factors. This would mean Subaru probably wouldn't get an authority of Gluttony, and in some ways I could see that being appealing to Tappei. Having Subaru accrue 7 authorities, no matter how tricky or double-edged he makes them to use, will make Subaru's abilities complicated to work with when it comes to having him come up with strategies for overcoming different situations, and also potentially really overpowered. Given the main premise of ReZero is about Subaru just having to press on and keep going, rather than him going to a fantasy world and collecting all the magical awesome powers, I could see Tappei favouring ways of Subaru attaining some of the witch factors that don't also mean racking up authorities, just to avoid that collection quest feel. There could also be the possibility that other people get certain authorities. For instance, I do have a theory about this regarding Ram, which will be the topic of another video very soon. But say that's not what happens, and Subaru is going to get all of the authorities. The authority of Gluttony being the next one he gets would seem the most likely. And this is interesting, because Gluttony is a strange one for Subaru. The authorities of the sins do manifest themselves very differently in different people. Regulus's authority of greed is very different from Echidna's, and the authority of greed Subaru gets, which he names Corleonis, is very different again. Subaru's greed is often mentioned in the story, particularly in Arc 4 when Roswaal and Echidna talk about how his desire to save everyone, to reach an ending that's really better than he has any right to hope for, is greedy. When his authority of greed begins to work for him, it's clear that this is very much a support power. He can see where the people he cares about saving are and get an idea of their status with a kind of spiritual heads-up display. And he can share the physical burdens of allies who are fighting, as he does for Ram and Mei Li in Arc 6. His authority is perfect for assisting him in getting what he specifically is greedy for, and it bears no resemblance at all to the authority Regulus had. This means that while the authority of Gluttony that allows the Sin Archbishops to eat people's names and memories would be completely unusable to Subaru, who wouldn't want to be able to do that even if it meant being able to use their advanced skills, Lunar and Solar Eclipse, that let them use the abilities and skills, or even transform into people they've eaten. His version of the authority wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with that. Subaru's authority of sloth is similar to Betelgeuse's. He can only use one invisible hand rather than lots of them, but whether that's actually something different about his power, or whether Betelgeuse had just become able to make more of them over time, where he had the ability for 100 years and used it a lot, we don't know. However, in those cases, it's probably something to do with both characters being connected to the Witch of Envy in some way. Betelgeuse loving her, and Subaru being the object of her love, because the invisible hands are also a power she has, though she can apparently make 2,000 of them. What's important to the idea that authorities are different depending who gets them is that there's no evidence that Sekhmet, the Witch of Sloth, had an authority involving invisible hands. The trouble is that, unlike greed or sloth, gluttony is not a sin that Subaru has ever been shown to have any real connection to in his own character. He has been shown at times to experience or do things that represent most of the sins, but some definitely more than others, and the two he seems to have the least connection with as a character are lust and gluttony. Lust because he has a fairly healthy relationship with it, rather than anything that suggests he has a character defect associated with lust that he'll need to get over. For instance, when Capella is tormenting him and Krush, and implying that he only cares about Krush because of human lust, we can easily believe that she's wrong, because that isn't how he thinks of Krush at all. But gluttony isn't just one we don't really see him have an issue with, it's more the only one we don't really see any connections to at all in Subaru's character. Other than liking to suck mayonnaise out of the tube, something he seemingly only did because his parents liked it anyway, he's never been shown to have any particular ties to gluttony as an urge or behaviour at all. This would mean that, unlike with greed, it would be hard to see how an authority of gluttony that matches Subaru's own form of the sin could really be created. This means that unless we want to go for a real crack theory, like Subaru's authority of gluttony will cause him to, I don't know, sweat mayonnaise, and yes, I did tone that joke down from the more obvious one for YouTube, we kinda do have to look at existing authorities of gluttony for ideas about what it could be. Some people think his authority of gluttony would just be the ability to restore the names and memories of the people who are eaten, but to me, that doesn't really seem like a power that would exist. An authority that just does the effects of its last holder just doesn't really track. That's not to say I don't think there will be a way of restoring those people, I just don't think that will be all the authority is. But what if we forget about the authorities the Sin Archbishops of Gluttony had, and think instead about the other character we've seen who had a gluttony witch factor, Daphne? This is definitely a crack theory, but I think it's interesting to think about, and who knows, there could be something in it. What if Subaru's authority of gluttony would have something to do with Daphne's authority, which allowed her to create witch beasts? Daphne created the three great witch beasts, the great rabbit, the white whale, and the black snake, as well as other witch beasts which included her coffin and Shaula. Shaula was probably made as a kind of commission for Flugel, as Shaula tells Subaru that she likes the design Mother and Master gave her, Master always meaning Flugel when Shaula says it, and Mother presumably meaning Daphne. This means that while Daphne did make the whale, rabbit and snake as her own insane solutions to world hunger, tying in with the gluttony thing, she could use her authority to make witch beasts that didn't really have anything to do with that, too. Now, while Subaru doesn't have much of a connection to gluttony as a concept, he does have plenty of connections to witch beasts. He is largely responsible for getting rid of the whale and the rabbits, and while the black snake has only shown up in scenes from the past so far, so we don't know where it even is in the current story, I can't see Tappei not having Subaru have to deal with the horrible thing at some point. Seriously, it's even worse than the rabbits. Subaru also becomes attached to Shaula, who thinks he's her master, and he can attract any kinds of witch beasts using the scent of the witch, which he smells of strongly to them if he's recently used Return by Death, or if he begins to talk about Return by Death, causing the witch to react. Witch beasts are interesting and have some of their own mysteries around them. For instance, it's unclear what their relationship to the witch cult is. I feel like there's supposed to be a lot more to the idea of witch beasts than for them to just be monsters to fight. And I think that Arc 6, which had Mei Li who can control witch beasts, switch from being an antagonist and obstacle to being an ally, as well as introducing Shaola, was the start of witch beasts coming into play a deeper role in the story. But what might an authority of gluttony that's connected to Daphne and the witch beasts be like? Well, the obvious answer would be something that allows Subaru to talk to or control witch beasts, similar to Otto's divine protection, but for witch beasts instead of regular beasts. But that would just basically give him the same ability as Mei Li. Mei Li went through a lot of character development to wind up being in Subaru's party, and I can't see the special abilities she brings to the table being made redundant by having Subaru be able to do the same exact thing. So what about an ability that actually relied on Mei Li being there instead? What if Subaru's authority of gluttony is actually the same as Daphne's, that he can create witch beasts? Perhaps as he'll be new to the authority and isn't so strongly connected to gluttony itself as Daphne, he wouldn't be able to make anything like the white whale or the black snake, or even like the dogs from season 1 or the guilty law from season 2. Maybe he can just create small things, like those bat-type things Mei Li had with her in season 2. This would work as the kind of power Tappei likes to give Subaru, in that it's pretty amazing on one level to think about it, in terms of being able to actually create life, but it's really only useful when applied in certain ways. And it also comes with the drawback that will mean Subaru won't just be spamming it in every situation. Now that drawback would be that if Subaru creates witch beasts, they will all just attack him due to the fact he smells like the witch. He may be able to create but not control them, just as Daphne doesn't control the great witch beasts she created, saying that she doesn't even really know how they hunt or what they do. This would make the ability usable strategically only when Mei Li is there, since she can make friends with the bad animal Chans, and if they're low level ones as suggested, this is pretty trivial for her. Since generally Tappei doesn't put every single character in each arc, Mei Li won't be by Subaru's side for every conflict, meaning that this option wouldn't always be on the table, preventing it from getting too heavily relied on. However, if he wanted to make it possible for Subaru to use it a bit more, then he'd just have to make it so that Otto's authority also lets him communicate with the creatures Subaru creates, and then it could be used with either Mei Li or Otto around. This would continue the trend of abilities Subaru needs to rely on somebody else to use, like the special spells he developed with Beatrice, and would also give him opportunities for Mei Li to be used in the story, after all the effort it took to get her onto the right team. Plus, who knows how it could be evolved in the story as we find out more about witch beasts. Could it lead to some kind of upgraded version of the skill that would let Subaru restore Shaola, for instance? Could it allow a way of fighting the black snake, which ordinary people wouldn't be able to even get close to? There are loads of things that could be done with it. So yeah, that's my discussion on the authority of gluttony and my suggestion of a crackpot theory about what it could be. This is just something I came up with, and I'm not saying it has a high chance of being what actually happens, but I think it's fun to think about, and you never know with these more bizarre theories whether there could be something in there that fits with whatever strange stuff Tappei's thinking too. So let me know in the comments what you think of all this, and if you have any other ideas for how Subaru's authority of gluttony might work. I'd also be interested to know if you think he will actually get a gluttony authority, or indeed get all 7 authorities at all. As always, if you like this video, please consider subscribing. I make theory and analysis videos like this for ReZero and Attack on Titan, as well as more normal coverage of the anime and source material, plus also some content about other anime series. And I upload several times a week, so if you want to help me out with growing my channel, please subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when there's a new video. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.